I still remember the exact moment when Harold Green, the district manager, slid that manila folder across the polished conference table. The fluorescent lights made the sweat on my forehead glisten as every eye in the room turned to me. "Catherine," he said, with that practiced corporate calm, "would you care to explain why you blocked the Westlake transaction on March 17th at 2:37 p.m.? My mouth went dry. The screenshots of my emails were right there, highlighted in bright yellow, along with the transaction logs showing my employee ID. What they didn't show was the trap I had walked into, thinking I was protecting the bank when I was actually sealing my own fate after 27 years of loyal service. Sitting there in that airless room, surrounded by colleagues whose expressions had turned from respect to pity in the span of a single meeting, I finally understood why my daughter always said I was too trusting. The silver pen I'd received at my 25-year anniversary dinner, the one engraved with 4 exceptional integrity, felt like a cruel joke in my pocket. My finger traced the edge of the table as Harold continued. "We have reason to believe this was not an isolated incident." And just like that, nearly 3 decades of perfect performance reviews meant nothing. What they didn't know yet was that I had kept every email, recorded every conversation that felt wrong, and documented every late-night request that had made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. What I didn't know then was who would still be standing when the truth finally came to light. That morning, I had arrived at Consolidated Atlantic wearing my lucky blue blazer, the same one I had worn to my job interview 27 years earlier. It still fit, though a bit more snugly around the hips, and I had been proud of that fact. Pride comes before a fall, as my mother would have said. If only she could see me now. Catherine Layton, 58 years old, senior account manager with over $800 million in corporate portfolios under her supervision, being questioned like a common thief. The cherry blossom trees outside the conference room window were in full bloom, dropping pink petals onto the pavement below. How strange that such beauty could frame such an ugly moment. Little did they know I had come prepared for war, not surrender. But would it be enough? I first joined Consolidated Atlantic Bank back in 1997, when my daughter Melissa was just starting middle school. I had been divorced for 3 years at that point, and the stable hours and solid benefits were exactly what a single mother needed. The branch on Maple Avenue was only a 15-minute drive from our modest 3-bedroom house, and my starting salary of $36,500 felt like a fortune after years of scraping by on alimony and part-time work. I remember how Melissa had helped me pick out my interview outfit, the blue blazer that would become my lucky charm, and how she had kissed my cheek and told me, "Mom, you're gonna knock their socks off." She was right. I was hired on the spot by Thomas Reeves, the branch manager at the time. "We need more people like you, Catherine," he had said, shaking my hand firmly. "People who understand the value of hard work and integrity." Thomas became more than a boss to me. He became a mentor and friend. Every Christmas, he would invite the staff to his home for a holiday party, where his wife Ellen would serve her famous eggnog that warmed you from the inside out. Under his guidance, I learned every aspect of banking operations, from teller transactions to loan processing to customer account management. Within 5 years, I had been promoted twice and had established a reputation as someone who followed the rules to the letter. By 2007, I had risen to department supervisor, overseeing a team of 12 accounts specialists. That was the year Thomas retired and Martin Blackwood took over as branch manager. The culture shift was immediate and jarring. Where Thomas had been warm and collaborative, Martin was cold and competitive. "Banking is changing, Catherine," he told me during our first one-on-one meeting. "It's not about community anymore. It's about numbers." I nodded politely, but inside I was troubled. I had always believed that banking was built on trust, on the sacred duty of safeguarding other people's money and dreams. But I kept these thoughts to myself and focused on adapting to the new leadership style. Melissa graduated from high school that same year, and I used my savings and a small loan to help her attend State University, where she studied business management. I was so proud watching her walk across the stage in her cap and gown 4 years later, the first in our family to earn a college degree. By then, I had weathered the 2008 financial crisis at the bank, watching with a heavy heart as foreclosure notices were sent to families I knew personally. I had done everything I could to help customers restructure loans and find solutions, often staying late into the evening to make calls and review paperwork. Martin had called me inefficient for spending so much time on individual cases, but I couldn't bring myself to treat people as mere numbers on a spreadsheet. In 2014, I was promoted again, this time to senior account manager, specializing in corporate accounts. It came with a corner office, with actual windows and a salary increase to $78,900 per year. Enough to help Melissa with the down payment on her first condo and still add to my retirement fund. The job was more complex, dealing with businesses rather than individuals. But the principles remained the same: accuracy, diligence, and integrity. I was good at what I did, consistently receiving performance bonuses for bringing in new corporate clients and maintaining excellent client satisfaction ratings. "You're our secret weapon," Catherine Martin would say during staff meetings. "No one can resist your grandmotherly charm." I smiled through the backhanded compliment, knowing that my success had nothing to do with charm and everything to do with treating clients with respect and honesty. Then, 2 years ago, Martin was promoted to regional operations, and Victoria Slater took his place as branch manager. Victoria was in her early 40s, sleek and ambitious, with designer suits and a Harvard MBA. Where Martin had been coldly efficient, Victoria was aggressively innovative. "We need to disrupt our own processes before someone else disrupts us out of business," was her mantra. She brought in consultants, reorganized departments, and implemented new digital platforms that changed how we interfaced with clients. Most of the younger staff embraced these changes enthusiastically, but some of us veterans struggled to keep up with the rapid pace of transformation. Victoria seemed to take a particular interest in me from the beginning. "Catherine, you're a goldmine of institutional knowledge," she told me over coffee during her first week. "I need you to help me identify where we can streamline and modernize while maintaining the trust you've built with our key accounts." I was flattered by her attention and eager to prove that I wasn't just some dinosaur resistant to change. So when she asked me to head up the transition team for the new digital corporate account management system, I readily agreed, despite already working 50-hour weeks managing my portfolio of clients. Looking back, I should have recognized the first warning signs. Victoria began inviting me to exclusive strategy meetings, often scheduled after hours or during lunch breaks. "Just us senior leaders," she would say with a conspiratorial wink. During these meetings, she would ask probing questions about other managers' performance, client relationships, and potential vulnerabilities in our systems. "I'm trying to get a complete picture," she explained when I hesitated to discuss a colleague's struggling account. "We're in this together, Catherine. I need someone I can trust completely." The word trust would become her most effective weapon against me. In January of this year, Victoria called me into her office on a Friday afternoon. Her blinds were drawn, unusual for her glass-walled office that she typically kept visible to demonstrate her transparency leadership style. "Close the door, Catherine," she said, her voice lower than usual. On her computer screen was a spreadsheet I didn't recognize, filled with client names and numbers. "I've identified some high-risk accounts that need special handling," she explained. "The regional office is concerned about potential money laundering flags, but we need to be discreet to avoid creating panic." My stomach tightened. Money laundering was serious business, requiring immediate reporting to compliance and potentially to federal authorities. "Shouldn't we notify compliance right away?" I asked, already reaching for my phone to call our compliance officer, Rachel Winters. Victoria quickly placed her hand over mine, stopping me from making the call. "Compliance has been notified at a higher level," she assured me. "What they need now is for us to quietly monitor these accounts and document any suspicious transactions. We report directly to Harold Green at the district level." She slid a folder across her desk. "These accounts fall under your supervision. I need you to watch them closely and alert me personally if you see anything unusual." I took the folder, noting the names of 4 corporate clients I managed: Westlake Properties, Meridian Supplies, Blue Harbor Investments, and Technovate Solutions. All were long-standing clients with significant holdings, and none had ever triggered compliance concerns during my oversight. "What specifically am I looking for?" I asked, flipping through the account summaries. Victoria leaned forward, her perfume, something expensive with notes of jasmine, wafting across the desk. "Large transfers, especially international ones, irregular payment patterns, Sudden changes in account activity. You know the signs. Catherine, you've been doing this long enough. There was something in her tone that didn't sit right with me. A note of condescension perhaps, or something else I couldn't quite identify. But I nodded professionally and took the folder. I'll keep an eye on them and report directly to you, I promised. As I turned to leave, Victoria called out, "And Catherine, this stays between us and the district office for now. Operational security is critical." I nodded again, the weight of the folder suddenly seeming heavier in my hands. That weekend, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. I pulled out my personal laptop, never the company one for personal research, and looked up each of the 4 companies. All appeared legitimate, with functioning websites, business registrations, and positive Better Business Bureau ratings. Westlake Properties was a commercial real estate developer with projects across 3 states. Meridian Supplies distributed medical equipment to hospitals and clinics. Blue Harbor Investments was a mid-sized private equity firm specializing in sustainable energy projects, and Technovate Solutions was a growing software company that had recently secured several government contracts. Nothing suspicious jumped out at me, which only deepened my concern about Victoria's instructions. On Monday morning, I arrived at work early and went straight to Rachel's office. Our compliance officer was already at her desk, coffee in hand, reviewing weekend transaction reports. "Got a minute?" I asked, lingering in her doorway. Rachel gestured to the chair across from her. "For you, always, what's up?" I carefully chose my words, mindful of Victoria's warning about discretion. "I'm reviewing some high-value corporate accounts for potential risk factors. Just wanted to check if you have any current flags or concerns about Westlake, Meridian, Blue Harbor, or Technovate." Rachel frowned slightly, typing the names into her system. "Nothing current," she said after a moment. "Westlake had a minor reporting delay last year, but they addressed it immediately. The others are clean." "Why do you ask?" I shrugged casually, though my heart was beating faster. Just being thorough. Victoria mentioned some general concerns about corporate account security. Rachel's expression changed subtly. "Victoria hasn't mentioned anything to compliance about specific security concerns. Is there something I should know?" I backpedaled quickly. "Probably just part of the new security protocols she's implementing. You know how she is about proactive oversight." Rachel nodded, but I could tell she wasn't entirely satisfied with my explanation. "Well, if you come across anything concrete, compliance should be your first call, not your last." I promised it would be and left her office with even more questions than I had arrived with. For the next several weeks, I monitored the 4 accounts with extra attention. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, except perhaps that all 4 companies had shown substantial growth over the past year, but that was hardly suspicious in itself. Each Friday, Victoria would call me into her office and ask for an update. Each time, I reported no suspicious activity, and each time, she seemed slightly disappointed. "Keep watching," she would say. "Sometimes these things take time to surface." Then, in late February, Victoria approached my desk with a newcomer in tow, a young man in his 30s, with fashionably tousled hair and a designer suit that seemed slightly too trendy for our conservative bank. "Catherine, I'd like you to meet Jason Mercer. He's joining us from corporate as a special projects consultant. He'll be working closely with us on our high-risk account management." Jason extended his hand, his grip firm but his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Pleasure to meet you, Catherine. Victoria speaks very highly of your expertise." Something about him immediately put me on edge. Perhaps the way his gaze seemed to be assessing me, calculating something I couldn't decipher. Victoria explained that Jason would need access to our client database to conduct his analysis. "He'll need your login temporarily, Catherine, since your access level covers all the accounts we're monitoring." I felt a jolt of alarm. Sharing login credentials was a direct violation of bank security protocols, something that had been drilled into us through years of compliance training. "I'm not comfortable with that," I said firmly. "It violates security policy. We should request a proper access credential for Jason through IT." Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "This comes from above, Catherine. Harold Green specifically authorized this exception, given the time-sensitive nature of the investigation." I stood my ground. "Then I'd like to see that authorization in writing, please." Jason and Victoria exchanged a quick glance that made my skin prickle. "Of course," Victoria said smoothly. "I'll have that for you this afternoon. In the meantime, Perhaps you can show Jason the general account structure so he can prepare his analysis framework. I agreed to that limited support, keeping my concerns to myself for the moment. That night, I began keeping a detailed journal of all these unusual requests and interactions, noting dates, times, and exact wording. Something wasn't adding up, and I wanted a record of everything, just in case. The written authorization never materialized. Instead, Victoria called me into her office the following morning, where Harold Green was waiting on a video call. The district manager's face filled her monitor, his expression serious. "Catherine," he began without preamble, "I understand you're hesitant about the special access required for our investigation." I explained my concerns about security protocol violations, expecting him to appreciate my caution. Instead, he frowned. "These are exceptional circumstances, Catherine. Sometimes protecting the bank means working outside standard procedures. Are you not a team player?" That phrase, team player, hit me like a slap. In my nearly 3 decades at Consolidated Atlantic, no one had ever questioned my commitment to the bank or my colleagues. "Sir, with all due respect, I am absolutely a team player. But I'm also responsible for maintaining account security and integrity." That's why Harold cut me off. "Victoria assures me that you're the best person to assist in this investigation. But if you're uncomfortable, we can certainly assign someone else." The threat was clear: cooperate or be sidelined. I felt trapped, caught between my instincts warning me that something was wrong and my fear of being pushed out of the investigation altogether, which would leave me with no visibility into what was happening. "That won't be necessary," I said carefully. "I'm happy to assist however I can, within the bounds of proper security protocols." Harold nodded, seemingly satisfied with my partial capitulation. "Good. I'll expect daily updates through Victoria." After the call ended, Victoria placed a hand on my shoulder. "I know this feels uncomfortable, Catherine, but trust me, it's necessary. Sometimes we have to bend the rules a little to protect the bigger picture." I nodded non-committally, but inside, a decision had crystallized. I would play along, but I would also protect myself and the bank by documenting everything and proceeding with extreme caution. The next day, Jason Mercer appeared at my desk with a flash drive. "Victoria asked me to install this analysis software on your computer," he said casually. "It will help us track pattern anomalies across the accounts you're monitoring." Again, alarm bells rang in my mind. External drives were strictly prohibited on our secure network, another fundamental security rule. "I can't allow that," I said firmly. "Any software installations need to go through IT and proper security verification." Jason's friendly demeanor cooled slightly. "This has already been cleared. But if you insist on being difficult..." He pulled out his phone and began texting someone. "Victoria," I assumed. Moments later, my phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "Allow the installation. This is authorized at the highest level. Don't create unnecessary obstacles." I looked up at Jason, who was watching me with a smug expression that made my blood boil. I had worked too long in banking security to ignore such a flagrant violation. "I'm sorry, but I need to consult with it first," I said, standing up from my desk. "It's not personal, it's procedure." Jason's smile disappeared entirely. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Victoria won't be happy." I walked away to find our IT security manager, Mark Daniels, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. Mark was as concerned as I expected. "Absolutely not," he said after I explained the situation. "No unauthorized software goes on our network, period. Who is this guy again?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Victoria calling. I excused myself to take the call. "Catherine, what are you doing?" Victoria hissed without preamble. "Jason just told me you're actively obstructing the investigation." I explained my actions calmly, emphasizing the security risks of unknown software. "If this is legitimate analysis software, it needs proper security vetting. I've spoken with Mark in it and he," Victoria, cut me off. "Mark isn't cleared for this operation. You're crossing lines you don't understand. Catherine, come to my office immediately." When I arrived at Victoria's office, she was pacing behind her desk, clearly agitated. "Close the door," she snapped. As soon as I did, her demeanor changed, becoming almost threatening. "Let me be very clear, Catherine. This investigation involves potential insider threats. Software Jason was attempting to install is specialized monitoring equipment designed to track unauthorized access to those accounts access that might be coming from inside the bank. Her implication hit me like a bucket of cold water. Was she suggesting that I might be involved in something improper? Are you investigating me? I asked incredulously. Victoria's expression softened into something that might have been meant to appear sympathetic but looked calculated to my now suspicious eyes. Of course not. You're one of our most trusted employees. That's why we need your cooperation. But by going to it, you've potentially compromised months of careful work. She sighed dramatically. Harold will need to be informed of this development. I felt manipulated, cornered. Victoria, if there are genuine security concerns, they should be handled through proper channels, including our security team and compliance. This cloak and dagger approach violates every protocol we have. For a flickering instant, something like anger flashed in Victoria's eyes before she controlled it. Sometimes traditional protocols are the problem, not the solution, especially when we don't know who we can trust. She paused, studying me. I had hoped you would understand that you would trust me. Trust, there was that word again, wielded like a weapon. I had always believed that trust was earned through transparency and integrity, not demanded through veiled threats and secrecy. But I nodded, buying time. I understand the sensitivity of the situation. Maybe we can find a compromise that doesn't violate security protocols. Victoria seemed to relax slightly. That's more like it. Here's what we'll do. Instead of installing the software, you'll monitor these accounts personally and report anything unusual directly to Jason and me. No one else, not Mark, not Rachel, in compliance, not anyone. Can you do that? I agreed, knowing it would give me time to figure out what was really happening. As I left her office, I made a decision that would ultimately save me. I would start recording every conversation with Victoria and Jason using the voice memo app on my personal phone, which I always kept in my jacket pocket. Pennsylvania was a two-party consent state for recordings, but I wasn't planning to use them legally, just to keep an accurate record for myself of what was being said. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I called in sick for the next day. In 27 years, I had used exactly 6 sick days, all for legitimate illnesses or medical procedures. But I needed time away from the bank to think clearly. I spent the day researching Victoria Slater and Jason Mercer, using my personal computer at home. Victoria's LinkedIn profile showed her meteoric rise through 3 different banks before landing at Consolidated Atlantic 2 years ago. Nothing unusual there, except perhaps the speed of her promotions. Jason was harder to find. His profile was sparse, listing only his current role as financial security consultant with no employment history or education details. A search for his name plus banking or finance yielded nothing relevant. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere. I also researched the 4 companies again, digging deeper this time. That's when I found something interesting. Westlake Properties had recently been awarded a $47 million government contract for developing a new administrative complex in Arlington. Meridian Supplies had just secured exclusive distribution rights for a breakthrough medical device. Blue Harbor Investments had acquired a promising green energy startup for $28.5 million. And Technovate Solutions had announced a new cybersecurity platform that had attracted significant venture capital attention. All 4 companies were on upward trajectories with substantial recent capital movements, exactly the kind of accounts that would be attractive targets if someone were looking to skim or manipulate large transactions. The pattern was becoming clearer, but it still didn't explain Victoria and Jason's unusual methods. If they were genuinely investigating potential fraud or money laundering, why not involve compliance and security from the beginning? Unless, a chilling thought occurred to me. What if they were the threat they claimed to be investigating? What if they were trying to gain unauthorized access to these valuable accounts? The thought seemed paranoid, but it would explain their insistence on secrecy and their attempts to bypass normal security protocols. I returned to work the following day with a pit in my stomach but a plan forming in my mind. I would play along just enough to gather evidence while protecting both the bank and myself. When Jason approached me that morning, asking again about installing his analysis software, I told him I had a better idea. I've created a secure reporting dashboard using our authorized analytics tools, I explained, showing him a spreadsheet I had developed overnight. It tracks all the key indicators without requiring external software. Would this work for your needs? Jason looked disappointed but nodded reluctantly. I suppose that could work for now. Show me how it functions. For the next 2 weeks, I maintained a precarious balance, appearing to cooperate while quietly documenting every unusual request and instruction. I set up alerts on all 4 accounts to notify me of any significant transactions or access attempts. I kept my recordings of all conversations with Victoria and Jason, now totaling 17 separate audio files stored on my personal cloud account, and I began carefully noting which other employees Victoria seemed to be pulling into her orbit of secrecy, primarily younger staff who looked at her with admiration and ambition in their eyes. Then, on March 17th at 2:37 p.m., exactly as Harold Green would later state in that fateful meeting, the alert I had been both expecting and dreading finally came through. Westlake Properties had initiated a wire transfer of $4.7 million to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The transfer had been authorized using my login credentials, which I had never shared with anyone while I was in a department meeting that Victoria had specifically asked me to attend. My blood ran cold as I stared at the notification on my phone. Someone had used my credentials to authorize a massive, potentially fraudulent transfer, and I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who that someone was. I immediately left the meeting, ignoring Victoria's sharp glance, and rushed to my computer. The transfer was in process, but not yet completed. Without hesitation, I placed a security block on the transaction and called our fraud prevention team. This is Catherine Layton, Senior Account Manager. I need an immediate hold on a wire transfer from Westlake Properties initiated at 2:37 p.m. using my credentials. I did not authorize this transfer, and I believe my login has been compromised. The security analyst on the other end responded with practiced efficiency, placing the hold and initiating the fraud investigation protocol. Within minutes, my desk phone rang. It was Victoria, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Catherine, what have you done?" I played innocent, though my heart was racing. "What do you mean?" Her voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "You blocked the Westlake transfer. That transaction was part of our investigation. Remove the block immediately." I took a deep breath, my hand instinctively pressing the record button on my phone in my pocket. "Victoria, someone used my credentials to initiate that transfer while I was in the meeting you asked me to attend. That's a serious security breach. I cannot and will not remove the block until a full investigation is conducted." The line went silent for a moment. When Victoria spoke again, her voice had changed, becoming silky and threatening. "Catherine, listen to me very carefully. That transfer was authorized at the highest levels as part of an operation you are not fully cleared to understand. By blocking it, you have potentially compromised national security. Remove the block now, or I will have no choice but to report your obstruction to authorities beyond the bank." The absurdity of her claim that a transfer to a Cayman Islands account was somehow related to national security only confirmed my suspicions. "I'm sorry, but I cannot do that. If this is legitimate, then Harold Green or someone from actual federal law enforcement can provide proper documentation, and we can proceed through official channels." Victoria hung up without another word. 10 minutes later, Jason appeared at my desk, his face flushed with anger. "You've really done it now," he hissed, leaning close. "Do you have any idea what you've interfered with?" I met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I believe I do. And if I'm right, you and Victoria should be very concerned right now." A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face before he masked it with contempt. "You're just a washed-up banker who doesn't understand modern finance. Victoria tried to protect you, include you, but you're determined to be difficult." He straightened up. "Clear out your desk. You're suspended pending investigation." I felt strangely calm as I gathered my personal items. Decades of maintaining detailed records, of following protocols even, when it wasn't convenient, had prepared me for this moment. I had evidenced the recordings, my journal of their unusual requests, the alerts showing the unauthorized use of my credentials. As I packed my lucky blue blazer into my tote bag, Rachel from compliance appeared at my cubicle, her expression concerned. "Catherine, what's happening?" I gave her a small, tight smile. "I think I've uncovered something serious, Rachel. But I need you to trust me and be careful. Watch Victoria and Jason Mercer closely, especially regarding the 4 accounts I asked you about earlier. And maybe call Westlake Properties directly to verify if they authorized a $4.7 million transfer today. Rachel's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. We had worked together for over a decade, and she knew I wasn't given to dramatic accusations. I'll look into it, she promised quietly. Take care of yourself, Catherine. As I walked out of the building that afternoon, I felt both terrified and oddly liberated. For the first time in 27 years, I had directly defied a superior's orders, but I had done so to protect the very values that Consolidated Atlantic had once claimed to embody. The question now was whether those values still meant anything to the institution I had served faithfully for most of my adult life. I spent that evening making copies of everything: my journal entries, the transaction logs I had saved, screenshots of the suspicious activities. I saved them on multiple USB drives, stored in different locations in my house. I knew that if Victoria and Jason were indeed involved in some kind of fraud, they wouldn't stop with a simple suspension. They would try to discredit me, possibly even frame me for their crimes. I needed to protect myself. I also made a difficult call to Melissa, now 37 and working as a marketing director in Seattle. Mom, is everything okay? You never call this late. I hesitated, not wanting to worry her, but needing to confide in someone I trusted. Completely. I'm in a bit of a situation at work, honey. Nothing I can't handle. But if anything strange happens, if anyone tries to contact you about me or my finances, don't share any information without talking to me first. Melissa was instantly on alert. Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on? I sighed, realizing how paranoid I must sound. It's probably nothing, just some unusual activities at the bank that I reported. But the people involved might not be happy about that. I could practically hear her straightening her spine. She had always been fiercely protective of me, even as a child. Give me names, Mom. If anyone messes with you, they'll have to deal with me too. I smiled despite the tension. That's my girl, but let's not escalate anything yet. I'm just being cautious. Before we hung up, Melissa made me promise to call her daily, just to check in. And if you miss a call, I'm on the next plane to Pennsylvania, she warned. The next morning, I received an email from Human Resources requesting my presence at a disciplinary meeting the following Monday, 4 days away. The email cited potential security violations and insubordination as the reasons for the meeting. I noticed that Harold Green was listed among the attendees, along with Victoria and someone from legal whose name I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened. They were moving quickly, trying to control the narrative. I needed to be quicker. I spent the day compiling my evidence into a clear, chronological report, including the timeline of suspicious requests and the unauthorized access to my account during the meeting Victoria had insisted I attend. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Mark in IT security. Catherine, are you okay to talk? His voice was hushed, as if he was calling from somewhere private. Yes, what is it, Mark? He hesitated. After you left yesterday, I ran a security audit on your login credentials, just to be thorough. There's something strange. Your account was accessed simultaneously from 2 different IP addresses during the time of that transfer. Your regular workstation and private device that connected through our guest Wi-Fi network. My suspicion was confirmed. Can you trace that device? Mark sighed. Already tried. It was a burner laptop with MAC address spoofing. Very sophisticated, Catherine. This looks like an inside job by someone who knows our systems well. I thanked Mark for the information and asked if he would be willing to document his findings for me. Already done, he said. I've saved the logs and written up my analysis. This violates every security protocol we have. I don't know what's going on, but I've got your back. His support meant more than he could know. After we hung up, I added his findings to my growing file of evidence. Then I made a decision that would change everything. I called the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I didn't know if they would take me seriously, but I had to try. After navigating through several automated menus and being transferred twice, I reached Agent Diana Calloway. Agent Calloway listened patiently as I outlined the situation, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. Ms. Layton, what you're describing sounds like a sophisticated attempt at wire fraud, possibly involving insiders at your institution. We take these reports very seriously, especially given the amounts involved and the potential for ongoing threats to other accounts. She explained that she couldn't promise immediate action, but she would open a preliminary investigation. In the meantime, she advised, continue to gather evidence, but be extremely careful. If these individuals are willing to use your credentials fraudulently, they may attempt other forms of retaliation. Her warning proved prescient. That evening, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, there was a moment of silence before a distorted voice spoke. Drop it, Catherine. You have no idea what you're getting into. Think about your retirement, your daughter. Some things are better left alone. The call disconnected before I could respond. My hands were shaking as I reported the call to Agent Calloway, who instructed me to note the exact time and any background noises I might have heard. This suggests they're worried, she said. People who aren't concerned don't make threatening calls. The weekend passed in a haze of anxiety and preparation. I rehearsed what I would say at the Monday meeting, organizing my evidence and anticipating their accusations. I also took some practical precautions, installing a security camera at my front door, changing all my personal passwords, and backing up my evidence in yet another location. This time, sending an encrypted file to Melissa with instructions to keep it safe but not to open it unless something happened to me. It felt melodramatic, but the threatening call had shaken me more than I cared to admit. Monday arrived with a gray drizzle that matched my mood. I dressed carefully in a charcoal suit that I reserved for the most important client meetings, adding a simple strand of pearls that had belonged to my mother. For courage, I whispered to myself as I fastened the clasp. I arrived at the bank 30 minutes early, nodding politely to colleagues who seemed uncertain how to interact with me. News of my suspension had clearly spread. I made my way to the conference room where the meeting was to be held, surprised to find Rachel from compliance already there, arranging papers at one end of the table. Catherine, she said, looking up with an unreadable expression. I'm glad you're early. We need to talk before the others arrive. My heart sank. Had Rachel been pulled into Victoria's orbit too? But as she gestured for me to sit, I noticed something in her eyes. Not betrayal, but determination. After you left on Thursday, I did as you suggested and contacted Westlake Properties directly, she said, keeping her voice low. Their CFO was shocked about the attempted transfer. They had authorized no such transaction to the Cayman Islands. In fact, they were in the middle of a legitimate transaction with a development partner in Arizona that was being inexplicably delayed. I felt a surge of validation. What did you do with that information? Rachel's expression hardened. My job, I launched a full compliance investigation and froze all unusual transfers from the other 3 accounts you mentioned. Victoria was livid. Tried to have me removed from the case, claiming some special operation that superseded normal compliance. But when I asked for documentation of this operation, she couldn't produce anything. Rachel slid a folder across the table to me. This is a copy of my preliminary findings. I've already sent the originals to the regulatory authorities and to Harold Green's boss, Regional Director Patrice Martinez. I could have hugged her. Rachel, thank you. I was beginning to think I was alone in this. She shook her head firmly. You're not alone, Catherine. Mark from IT came to me with his findings too. And once we started looking, we found similar patterns with other accounts. Always large businesses with recent capital inflows. Always with attempted transfers to the same 3 offshore destinations. She glanced at her watch. They'll be here soon. Victoria doesn't know yet that I've gone over her head. She thinks this meeting is still about disciplining you, not exposing her. The door opened, and Harold Green walked in, followed by Victoria and a woman I assumed was the legal representative. Victoria froze momentarily when she saw Rachel and me sitting together, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before her professional mask slipped back into place. Catherine, you're early, she said smoothly. And Rachel, I don't believe you were on the attendee list for this meeting. Rachel stood, gathering her papers calmly. Actually, as Chief Compliance Officer, I'm required to attend all disciplinary meetings involving potential security breaches, bank policy. She nodded to Harold. Mr. Green, I've taken the liberty of providing copies of my initial compliance findings regarding the Westlake Properties incident for everyone. Victoria's composure slipped visibly. That won't be necessary. This meeting is about Catherine's insubordination and interference with an authorized operation. Harold Green who had been quietly observing the interaction, finally spoke. "Let's all sit down. It seems we have several matters to discuss," as everyone took their places. I noticed Jason Mercer slipping into the room, positioning himself against the wall behind Victoria rather than taking a seat at the table. His presence made me even more certain that I had been right to prepare as thoroughly as I had. And so we circle back to where my story began, that moment when Harold Green slid the manila folder across the table and asked me to explain why I had blocked the Westlake transaction. Now you understand the context, the weeks of mounting suspicion and careful documentation that led to that moment. As all eyes in the room turned to me, I straightened my shoulders and reached into my bag, pulling out my own folder of evidence. "I'd be happy to explain, Mr. Green, but first, I think it's important that you understand the full context of what's been happening over the past several weeks." For the next 20 minutes, I laid out the evidence methodically, the unusual requests from Victoria and Jason, their attempts to circumvent security protocols, the unauthorized use of my credentials during a meeting Victoria had specifically directed me to attend, and the threat I had received after reporting the incident. I played selected portions of my recordings, watching Victoria's face drain of color as her own voice filled the room, instructing me to bypass security measures and later demanding I remove the block on the fraudulent transfer. This wasn't about protecting the bank, I concluded. This was about exploiting high-value corporate accounts during periods of significant capital movement, using my credentials and reputation as cover for the fraud. Harold Green's expression had grown increasingly grave as I presented my evidence. When I finished, he turned to Victoria. "Miss Slater, do you have any response to these allegations?" Victoria's composure had completely disintegrated. Her eyes darted to Jason, who had edged closer to the door during my presentation. "This is a complete mischaracterization," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "The operation was authorized. I have documentation." She fumbled in her briefcase, becoming more flustered when she couldn't produce whatever she was looking for. Jason suddenly spoke up from his position near the door. "Mr. Green, with all due respect, this meeting has clearly been hijacked by a disgruntled employee facing disciplinary action. Catherine Layton is manufacturing conspiracy theories to distract from her own failure to follow direct instructions from her superiors." He stepped forward confidently. "If you'll allow me to access my secure files, I can show you the authorization for our special monitoring operation." Signed by Regional Director Martinez herself. At that moment, the door opened again, and a woman I didn't recognize entered the room, followed by two men in suits who had federal agent written all over their serious expressions and alert eyes. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Mercer, or should I say, Mr. Kleinman." The woman's authoritative voice filled the room. "I'm Regional Director Patrice Martinez. These gentlemen are Agents Wilson and Rodriguez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force." She turned to Harold Green. "Harold, I received some very disturbing information from your compliance officer this weekend. I came as quickly as I could." Jason, or Kleinman, apparently made a sudden move toward the door, but Agent Rodriguez stepped smoothly into his path. "Jason Kleinman, we have some questions regarding your involvement in a series of fraudulent wire transfers at 3 different financial institutions over the past 18 months. Jason's face contorted with rage as he looked at me. "You stupid old woman," he spat. "You have no idea what you've done, Agent." Wilson placed a restraining hand on Jason's shoulder. "Sir, I suggest you save your comments for the formal interview." Victoria seemed to collapse in on herself, her designer suit suddenly appearing too large for her diminished presence. "I didn't know," she whispered, though no one had directly accused her yet. "Jason approached me about modernizing our fraud detection. He had credentials, references. He said we could identify vulnerabilities by testing the system ourselves." Regional Director Martinez fixed her with a cold stare. "And the $4.7 million you attempted to transfer to a Cayman Islands account, was that also testing the system?" Victoria had no answer, her gaze fixed on the table in front of her. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements and documentation. I repeated my account for the federal agents, providing copies of all my evidence. Rachel presented her compliance findings, and Mark detailed the security breach that had allowed someone to use my credentials remotely. By late afternoon, Jason had been taken into custody, and Victoria had been escorted from the building, her company ID and access cards confiscated. Harold Green looked shell-shocked, repeatedly murmuring, "How did I miss this?" They seemed so professional, so knowledgeable. Regional Director Martinez pulled me aside as the meeting finally broke up. "Ms. Layton, I want to personally thank you for your vigilance and courage. Your actions prevented a significant fraud and helped us connect this case to similar incidents at other institutions. We believe Mr. Kleinman is part of a sophisticated ring targeting financial institutions through precisely the kind of infiltration you experienced." She handed me her card. "We'll need your continued cooperation as this case proceeds, but please know that your position here is secure. In fact, once this is resolved, I'd like to discuss a potential role for you in our regional security training program." As I drove home that evening, the rain had stopped, and the setting sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the familiar streets of my neighborhood. The weight that had pressed on my chest for weeks had lifted, replaced by a quiet pride in standing firm for what I knew was right. I called Melissa from my driveway, my voice breaking slightly as I told her it was over, that the truth had prevailed. "I knew it would, Mom," she said confidently. "You've always taught me that integrity matters more than anything else. I'm booking a flight for this weekend. We need to celebrate properly." The next few months brought significant changes to Consolidated Atlantic. Harold Green took early retirement, acknowledging that the security breach had occurred under his watch and accepting ultimate responsibility. Victoria faced criminal charges for her role in the fraud attempt. Though her attorneys were working on a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Jason and his associates, the 4 corporate clients whose accounts had been targeted were notified of the attempted fraud, and all expressed gratitude for the bank's hand. Specifically my intervention. Rachel was promoted to Regional Compliance Director, overseeing security protocols for all branches in our area. In her first official act, she implemented new verification procedures for executive-level requests that might bypass normal security measures. The Layton Protocol, she called it, much to my embarrassment and secret pleasure. Mark from it received recognition for his thorough security audit that had helped identify the breach, and I was offered a new position as Senior Security Advisor, with a focus on training staff to recognize social engineering and internal fraud attempts. The FBI investigation eventually revealed that Jason Kleinman had orchestrated similar schemes at 2 other banks, successfully transferring over $12 million before being caught. His method was always the same: charm his way into a management position or consulting role, identify high-value accounts during periods of legitimate high activity, and then manipulate or coerce employees into helping him bypass security measures. Victoria had been both his accomplice and his victim, initially believing his stories about security testing, but later becoming complicit when he offered her a percentage of the proceeds. 6 months after that fateful meeting, I sat in my new office, smaller than my previous one, but with an even better view of the cherry trees that now displayed their brilliant autumn foliage. My phone rang. Westlake Properties, one of the clients whose accounts I had saved. "Ms. Layton, it's David Chen, CFO. I wanted to personally invite you to the grand opening of our Arlington complex next month. We'd like to acknowledge your role in protecting our company during the ribbon-cutting ceremony." I accepted graciously, touched by the recognition. As I hung up, my eyes fell on the silver pen from my 25-year anniversary, which I had placed in a small display case on my desk. For exceptional integrity. The inscription read, Those words meant more to me now than they ever had before. In a world of digital fraud and sophisticated schemes, sometimes the most valuable security measure was simply a person who refused to compromise their principles, even when pressured by those in authority. I had nearly lost everything by standing firm, but in the end, that same stance had saved not just my career but my self-respect. I receive emails and calls almost weekly now from other banks and financial institutions, asking me to share my experience and the lessons I learned. I always emphasize the same points. Trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right. Document everything. Build relationships with colleagues who share your commitment to integrity. And remember that security isn't just about technology. It's about people making choices every day about what they're willing to compromise. Sometimes the most sophisticated fraud can be stopped by the simplest act of courage, saying no when saying yes would be easier. Looking back at those dark weeks of uncertainty and fear, I'm struck by how close we came to disaster, and how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't blocked that transaction. if I hadn't documented the unusual requests, if Rachel and Mark hadn't been willing to look deeper when I raised concerns. The trap that Victoria and Jason set was clever. They used my reputation for integrity against me, counting on my loyalty to the bank to make me follow orders without question. But they miscalculated. True loyalty sometimes means refusing to follow a directive that violates core principles. Melissa visits more often now, bringing her new fiancé to dinner at my house every few weeks. Last time, as we sat on my back porch watching fireflies dance in the summer twilight, she asked me if I was ever afraid during those weeks of investigating my own superiors. Terrified, I admitted, sipping my iced tea. But you know what was even scarier? The thought of not doing anything, of looking the other way, while something wrong happened on my watch. She squeezed my hand, her eyes reflecting the same determination I'd tried to instill in her since childhood. That's why they never stood a chance against you, Mom. They thought fear would win. They didn't understand what really matters. What really matters. It's a question worth asking ourselves regularly, especially in moments of pressure or confusion. For me, the answer has always been simple: truth, integrity, and the courage to stand by both, even when it would be easier to look away. It's not always the comfortable choice, and it certainly wasn't the safe choice when I blocked that transaction thinking I was going to win, only to discover the trap was set against me. But it was the right choice, and ultimately, that's the only victory that truly counts. So, let me ask you, listening to my story right now, what would you have done in my position? Would you have followed orders, looked the other way, protected your job at the expense of your integrity? Or would you have taken the harder path, knowing it might cost you everything? Leave a comment below. I read them all. And if you know someone facing a similar test of character, someone being pressured to compromise their values, share this with them. Sometimes all we need is to know we're not alone in choosing to do what's right. This is Catherine Layton, recording from my home in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where the cherry blossoms still remind me each spring that beauty and integrity endure, even after the harshest storms.